People on the autism spectrum tend to be very routine oriented, very, rule oriented. And one of the biggest reasons for this is that people on the autism spectrum also tend to be very detail oriented. So for a lot of people, when you first look at something or you do something or you're learning about something, a lot of people tend to see the big picture first and then pick up on some details, but maybe forget some of the little details because they don't see those as important. They see the bigger picture as kind of what comes naturally, and they get the gist, and that's good. People on the autism spectrum tend to think sort of the opposite way, where they're picking up on details. Sometimes that means maybe missing the big picture or not always getting the big picture, but getting all the little details just right. And because of that difference in viewpoint, sometimes if one small detail is changed, since that general big picture isn't there, it can just seem like the whole thing is different, like it's not even the same anymore. So having a routine or having something that you do the same way over and over is safe, it's predictable, you know what to expect, and even one little change in a routine or in a detail, like I said, can be very stressful and very panic-inducing because, again, it can feel like everything's different and nothing's the same anymore, if that makes sense. So sometimes routines are things that kind of come naturally and, oh, this is how it is, and then sometimes a routine might be something that's built in, like at school. We have a routine where we go throughout our school day in a certain order, or at work, sometimes we have specific routines that we need to do. So even though someone on the spectrum might be very routine oriented, that doesn't mean that they're automatically going to pick up on every routine in every setting unless it's explicitly taught. Sometimes people on the spectrum also have like very intense interests. Sometimes only want to learn about trains or only want to talk about anime. And sometimes this is just because that's what they're interested in. So of course you want to talk what you're interested in. And sometimes though, again, it's some of that safety and that predictability, and I know this and it's safe and this is what I do. And that can mean, I don't want to try something new because I already know I like this and this is nice. So that predictability and that safety piece are really biggies when we talk about routine. Oops. Here we go. Now I can move on. So some of this leads to really rigid thinking. So again, if one detail is off means everything is changed to the person on the spectrum, then having mental flexibility can be difficult because it's scary and it's not comfortable, and this is something that just needs to be worked on a lot of times. So doing something out of the ordinary, changing a routine, if they have a plan and the plan gets changed unexpectedly, these are all really, really stressful scenarios for people on the spectrum. I want you to kind of keep in mind too that you being a link and you being a new link for your peer, this is a change in routine, and even though it's a change that has been welcomed, that doesn't mean it's not stressful and scary and anxiety provoking. So just keep that in mind. Sometimes, see if someone has a routine that they follow, or they know that there's rules that are supposed to be followed, and then someone else breaks the rules, that can be stressful for the person on the spectrum too. And a lot of times that might get pointed out, like, oh, no, you're not supposed to do that, you're not supposed to do that. And again, it kind of goes back to that predictability and safety piece, and having some of that difficulty with being flexible. So if we're trying to work on building routines, maybe at home or at school or even in the workplace, there's a few strategies that tend to work better for people on the autism spectrum. And the first one is social stories. These are commonly used in the format that you kind of see here, for people who are a little bit younger than who you're working with. But again, depends on the person. And it's just a story that's in a little short format that explains a situation. So, for example, the first one we have here is like soccer at recess, okay? So it's maybe someone on the playground at recess had difficulty, like they wanted to be the goalkeeper all the time, but that's not possible. You need to trade and give other people a chance to play goal sometimes. So this just sort of lays out like a sample scenario of how that might happen and how we can switch, and some people can play goalkeeper sometimes and some people can play goalkeeper the other times. And it's just a story about this is how things go. This is how to navigate this social situation. So you could have a social story for any kind of social situation, and it's just saying this is how we can do things. It can give people words to say if they're not sure what to say. It can give people a chance to see something from someone else's point of view that in the moment might be difficult. And it can be something that can be revisited since it's in like a format like audio or a book. There also might be visual supports. So the social stories are one support, visual supports are another support. This is huge. So it might be something really simple, like first we do this, then we do this. First, you have to do the hard stuff, you got to do the work, then you get to have some fun time on the computer. Instead of saying the words, though, having the visual. Visual tends to be the way to go when it goes with communicating with people on the autism spectrum. So sometimes the words get lost, the words, we talk and talk and talk and talk, and that can be completely overwhelming, overstimulating. It can just go one ear and out the other sometimes. Not always, but visual tends to be more effective. Here you see pictures. It could also be just written down. You see another example here in the middle. It's a list. Okay, so let's say this is what's going to happen. We're going to go to the doctor's office tomorrow. Here's what to expect. Again, if it's a new or it's not already in the routine, it can be scary. So giving some priming, a little heads up on what's going to happen can be good. And again, not speaking, not explaining what's going to happen. That's just too much blah, blah, blah. It needs to be visual priming. So you can either have written words or even pictures if the person can't read. The pictures work just fine. But the list could work as well. So as a link, I want you to kind of keep this in the back of your head, that as you're working with your peer and communicating with your peer, we tend to go the auditory route and speak to each other a lot, but maybe start thinking about how you can incorporate some visual communication. Is it more effective to just put a couple bullets down and make a list or things like that? Just something to keep in mind as you're working with your peer. So those are a couple ways, and we will continue talking about more, but those are a few ways that you can kind of start to build routines at home and at school. We have some rules and routines that maybe we're not directly teaching. It's not something that we need for school or work, but that someone on the spectrum might have. They might have a rule or a routine or a way things need to get done. Sometimes it's hard to understand those, or sometimes we see behaviors or hear someone say something and it's confusing to us because we don't know what that person's own rule is. It's their rule. We don't know the rule. They think we should know the rule a lot of times and we don't, and so it can cause some miscommunication. So for example, I had a student who would sometimes be at my door, 5th hour after lunch, and I'd get there and the student would say, like, "You're late." I'm like, "I'm not late. Like, class hasn't started yet. I'm just, leaving the lunchroom." And this happened a few different times, and for a while I'm like, what is going on? Like, I don't understand why the student's telling me I'm late when I'm clearly not late. But come to find out after, digging a little bit, this kid's rule was if I wasn't there before him, I was late, because usually teachers are in the room before kids come in. So he had kind of picked up on this. This was his rule. And, you know, it didn't make me leave lunch any earlier, but we had to work on this. It's something I had to work on. Like, hey, I'm not going to be here necessarily until the bell rings, just so you know, because I'm still eating lunch. So we had to work on that. But, you know, I had a similar scenario with his first hour teacher, where sometimes he would be there first and she would get there after him, and again say the same thing, like, you're late. And, you know, this can really bother some people. So if you're not understanding that, like, this is his rule, or you're not trying to figure out, like, why would this person be saying this, it can lead to some negative associations or assumptions. So she mentioned to me, like, you know, he's making up these lies about me, saying I'm late, like, I think he's trying to get me in trouble. I'm like, you know, calm down. He's not doing this to be mean to you. He's not doing this to make you mad or try to get at you. He's not going to, you know, get you fired. So, but this is his rule, and you're breaking it, and we just need to work on that. So it's sometimes if you're not understanding what's going on, or why someone's acting a certain way, or why they're saying what they're saying, you know, digging deeper and trying to find, like, well, maybe they have a rule that I'm breaking, and even if you don't know what it is, and so it can be tricky. A couple of years ago, there was a story. It went viral, which in some ways is crazy, and in some ways is sad, and in some ways is really cool. It went viral, and it was about this girl who went to Chili's and ordered a hamburger. And it was like, you know, a girl and her little sister. So she orders the hamburger, the waitress comes back and brings it, and the girl, who happened to be on the autism spectrum, looked at the burger and was just like, no, it's broken, and was very upset about this hamburger. And it had been sliced in half. I guess they, you know, did that a lot for when they had a kid, make it easier to eat something. So instead of the waitress being like, hey, you know, it's a cheeseburger, it tastes the same, just eat it, that's how they come, she understood that this girl could not have a broken hamburger, said, oh, no problem, you know, we'll get you a new one, and took it back, and they gave her a new burger that wasn't broken, free of charge. And this story went viral all over the place. You know, this picture of this girl, you know, the sister snapped a picture. This picture of this girl kissing her cheeseburger just went all over the place, just because a little bit of kindness and understanding, it can go a long way. So, good story. So when we have these rules and routines, if it's a self-imposed rule or a self-imposed routine, you know, like I have to line up all those toys before I go to bed or whatnot, do we need to work on it? Because sometimes it can look weird, or it can be like, well, why would someone be doing that? And I guess the answer is that sometimes it needs to be addressed and sometimes it doesn't. So if it's just a strange thing that we need to figure out, or you just need to, like, get over that it's weird, it doesn't need to be addressed, right? That's like not the person on the spectrum's problem, that's our problem. So we need to work on not being annoyed or not thinking something's weird, and just say, like, oh, okay, for that person, that's what they do, no big deal. If it's getting in the way of something, or it's causing a problem, or it's interfering with, you know, how the person's growing or learning or being able to do X, Y, or Z, then yeah, then we can try to address it and work on it. You know, kind of like I said about you're late. Well, you know, here's how this rule is going to work here. Like, I'm not late unless the bell rings, and I come in after, and I'm a teacher, so I can do that anyways. Haha. But anyways, we just have to make sure that we're not trying to, like, push our standard of what's normal on people on the spectrum, because why? Just to make us more comfortable? Like, that's crazy. So we just kind of keep in mind as we're working on supporting our peers, not to, you know, crush behaviors that we see as strange or as different if there's really no need to, and that's just an area of growth that we need to work on.